Hey guys, welcome back to Rad JBI. I'm JB. Today we're going to do a short and sweet install video on our new JBI KYB DIY fork kit. This video is going to highlight the specific details on how to install the DIY kit that we are providing to you. Later on in the future, we'll do a complete install video where we actually break down an entire fork from start to finish for those of you that don't already have the understanding on how to build a fork. So to the left of me, I have our JBI KYB DIY kit. I also have a KYB fork cartridge assembly that's been semi-disassembled, and I have the tooling as well. So let's start from the top and get into this video. All right, so let's break down the tools that you're going to need to successfully install this JBI DIY KYB fork kit. We're going to need some heat, we're going to need some Loctite, some grease, 3 different size wrenches. We got a 19, a 14, and a 10. I beg of you, please get a 1/4 inch torque wrench. A lot of you out there are heavy-handed. I know this because I commonly have to sell you replacement sub-valves when you guys get a little too carried away with it. So please grab one of those. I believe these are called duckbill pliers. They're great for removing snap rings. It'll make life a lot easier for removing the oil lock collar to remove the spring seat in order to install our volume spacer. Brass wire brush is great for moving the old Loctite. We're going to need some shaft block clamps, specifically the 12.5mm size for gripping this cartridge rod. You're going to need this tool, which is our compression assembly cap tool. Fits right into here. That's going to be used for fixturing it. Now this T-handle I'm going to be using to put shims on to hold them in order. Here at the shop, we have some wire coat hangers that we've just cut and bent. I know a lot of you don't have that, but if you may have some small T-handles. And then lastly, I have a long size number 10 T-handle. You can also use an extension with a socket as well. We're going to use this to help guide our cartridge rod assembly back into the cartridge cylinder assembly once we are all done and completed. So now that we've gone over the tools that you're going to need for this, let's break down the assembly of parts that we have provided you with. Included in the JBI KYB DIY kit are going to be the following components. What you can first see is our JBI volume spacer. The size that we provide to you will be based on the year, make, model bike that you provide us with, as we have 2 different sizes depending on the generation cartridge that you have. All of them will come with our JBI titanium subvalve. As you can see, it's minorly different design as it has 4 sides for you to grip on, but overall the design of the subvalve and how much oil it flows is pretty much the same as OEM. But as you may have found out, we made it out of titanium because we love titanium. This will allow you to apply a higher torque to the M6 nut on the end of it, and pretty much eliminate the possibility of you guys possibly over torque it and breaking it. Also, our post is just a little bit longer, so that way for the really stiff applications where we have to use a lot of shims, we have plenty of room as well. We're also going to provide you with a complete new Rebound piston post as well. It'll complete with all the shims. It'll have our leaf spring plate as well, an M6 nut. Now we have 2 variations of these depending on the model bike that you have. For many of them, we're going to have a flared out bottom here. What I mean by that is where the top out spring is going to contact when the fork fully extends. Now on some of the models, that feature is located farther up, so the top out spring actually hits here. So depending on the model that you order from us, you either get this Rebound post style with the same valving and lock nuts, or you'll get this Rebound post style again with the same valving and lock nut. And then to top it off, of course, we'll have a bag in there that says JBI mid-valve Rebound shims. So that tells you the Rebound shims that you're going to use with this. So now that we've broken down the tools that you're going to need, the components that we are providing you with for this install, let's dive right in and start installing this kit into this KYB SSS fork cartridge. All right, we're going to begin by first installing the new JBI titanium subvalve assembly that we have provided you with. So first we're going to take our compression assembly tool. We're going to fixture it inside of a vise right here. And that is going to allow us to put this right on top, and it'll prevent this from twisting left to right. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a 14mm wrench, find our 2 flat spots we have on the OEM subvalve right here, and we're going to apply a force this way to break it loose. Cool, so let's set this aside. Now for many of you, you're going to have an oily assembly. This was probably previously already installed. What I'm working on is brand new, but what I'd like for you to do is to go ahead, Slide this piece off. Let's take off our pressure spring. You're going to have a little top hat spacer. Just inspect what's called your free piston shaft. Make sure there's no wear, marks, or anything that could impede the sealing of what's called our free piston shaft seal on here. This one looks all clean. Let's also check our threads as well to see if there's any Loctite that might be in there. If there is, that's where this brass wire brush is going to come into play, and we can clean off any Loctite that may be in there. So this one's looking all clean. So we'll reassemble it first with our spring seat guide spacer. The top hat piece is going to go up. Our pressure spring, this is not directional. It can go either way. Our other spring seat spacer, now the top hat's going to go down and locate inside of the spring. And then lastly, our free piston will slide on. As we do this, let's be nice and not drag the free piston seal against these threads. So now that we have that done, we are ready to now install this onto there. So I'm going to grab the orange Loctite we use here. We purchased this off of Amazon. I'm going to give the bottle a little bit of a shake to kind of mix it up. And then I'm going to do a little drop of Loctite on the threads. And then I'm actually going to take my fingers and I'm going to evenly distribute it among the threads onto here. Now, as you see, I'm keeping this angled down, so that way any excess Loctite is going to drip away from our free piston seal. And while I'm still doing that, I'm going to grab our new JBI titanium subvalve. I'm going to start threading it on by hand. And I'm actually going to kind of do this upside down. So that way we're going to allow any Loctite to kind of drip out this way and not go to our free piston seal. But we're not going to have any drip because we took the time to spread that Loctite evenly among the threads and we didn't apply too much. Now it's time to put it back into our assembly, and we're going to tighten this on down to pretty much the same amount of effort it took for you to remove the original one. Awesome. So now let's set this aside because we're going to need to reuse the original piston and everything on the backside of it. So that's what we call the Rebound check plate. There's going to be a spring keeper, and those will be the components that we use. And I'll show you how to get that removed next. As you'll see, I mounted it right into the middle of the vise. This will give it the best grip. Talking about grip, the Bridgestone X31 tires provide exceptional traction in soft to medium riding conditions. Now what we're going to do is we're going to remove the M6 nut on top. I prefer not to get my hands dirty with metal shavings, dust, and all those things, because we do that plenty often here at Ride JBI. And since we're not going to reuse this subvalve, I'm just going to go ahead and just muscle off this M6 nut, and we're going to ruin the threads in the process. Cool, we can take that nut, set it aside. That way we can slide the stuff we want right onto a tool and keep it all in one spot. Now, as we did this, the top of the subvalve post kind of got flared outwardly, so it might be hard to take off the piston. So you can either grind that, or you can grab something like these guys, and we're going to just squeeze the top of it and work our way around. Cool. And everything below here you can just set aside because we're not going to reuse any of this assembly or shims. So let's remount our compression assembly tool. We can put this back in. This M6 lock nut is just going to be finger tight from us. Now, we've already done a good job of really cleaning off these shims when we provide them to you, but please double check. Make sure the top of these shims are clear and free of any dirt, debris, or dust, or anything else that could have got on top of it while you are working on it. If you do see any, you can either blast it off with compressed air or use something like your microfiber rag to clean off the surface. Man, that burnt titanium blue looks phenomenal. I am loving it. Call me McDonald's. All right, so this is our compression piston. We have two different faces on it. We have one face that is relatively flat. The center of it does not have, it's not countersunk, whereas on this side, it has a countersink in the middle. So what's going to go against the shims is going to be this side. First, I'm going to take some compressed air, give a little Make sure it's totally free of any dirt, debris, dust. Slide that down. Now we got the components that we need to reinstall from the top of it. I'm going to lay these out one by one so you can see exactly what we have and where it goes. So this is what we call our Rebound check plate. This would be our Rebound return spring. This will be our floating collar for the shim, and we'll call this the spring keeper. So the first thing I'm going to put on is going to be this 8mm collar post. That's going to slide on top and locate right into the center of the piston. Next, we'll grab our check shim, and you'll see that locates just on the outside of the collar. Next is our spring. This is directional. The smaller end is going to go down, and the wider side is going to match up with this spring plate. This is directional as well. So that's how our assembly looks. Now we're going to push down a little bit, apply some Loctite to these threads, and then put on our M6 nut. All right, so I've removed the compression assembly from the fixture. I have it in my hand, and as you can see, I'm holding down this spring plate with my fingers. I'm going to apply a little bit of Loctite, but I'm actually going to do that at an angle into the threads, and we're going to keep holding that down. We don't want any Loctite seeping down. If some does, it's not the end of the world, but the less that happens, the better. And then I'm going to move my fingers to kind of spread that Loctite around. Let's check our work. We can use just a little bit more. Now this part will be kind of awkward because you're trying to hold that spring plate down, trust me, but it'll be worth it in terms of doing clean work. So we've started our nut. Now the nut is directional. This is going to be the top of it. Cool. So if we did it correct, our check plate will be able to lift open just a small amount, and it will be able to spin. So you want to check those two things. It should lift open and it should spin. Now it is time for us to torque down our nut. This is a 1/4 inch drive torque wrench. I have it set at 55 inch-pounds. That is not 55 foot-pounds. There's a pretty big difference between the two. And one more click for good luck. Boom. Beautiful. So let's double check our work one last time. First, let's verify our base compression piston, the dark gray piece. It should not rotate. It should not move at all. The only item that should move should be our Rebound check shim. Again, it'll slightly lift open, and we'll be able to rotate it as well. Now, one last check we're going to do is we're going to look at all these individual shims. We have a crossover shim in this stack. So you see a little gap between the largest 31mm shims and then the 28mm that comes afterwards. But beyond that, there should not be any gap or bulge in the shims. If there is, that means you got some dirt, debris, or dust inside of it. The best way for you to check for that is to hold this up to the light and look through it that way and check if you see any light shining through. On some of these assemblies we sell, again, there will be a crossover shim in there, so there will be a small gap in there purposely. Other ones will be a single stage shim stack, so there won't be any crossover shim inside of there or a gap. What we're looking for are any irregularities, meaning if on one side of the shim stack there's a small bulge, or maybe there's a gap of light coming through. That tells you that some sort of dirt, debris, or dust got inside the valve at that time. In order to fix that, you're going to re-loosen the M6 nut, take some compressed air, blow it around inside of your shims, reapply Loctite, torque that nut back down, and then that should resolve your issue. So this is looking phenomenal. It is time to set this down. We're going to let this cure for a little while, and we're going to shift our focus to the cartridge rod that has the Rebound piston assembly on it. Cool, I got the cartridge assembly in my hand. I got our new JBI components that we are going to replace on this rod. So the first step is we're going to mount this inside of our vise. We're going to use the two flat spots that are located on the Rebound piston post. Now when we do this, be careful not to get the cartridge rod to rub against the inside of the vise. Now our first step is going to grab another 10mm wrench, and we're just going to rip off this nut because we're not going to reuse this piston post, this nut, or anything. The only thing we really want from here is the Rebound piston itself. Now this one's going to give you a little bit more trouble than the subvalve because this rebound post is made out of steel versus the subvalve was made out of aluminum, the OEM one. So we get a little bit more resistance. The valving on top, we're going to set that aside even though we're not going to reuse it. And now likely this isn't going to just slide off because the edge of this post is kind of flared outwardly. So we're going to do the same trick as we did last time. We're going to grab our nit picks and we're going to kind of just squeeze the top in, work our way around it. And now that should allow us to just slide this right off. So this is what we do want to reuse. We will take off the rest of the valve in here because we're going to heat this up a little bit. Set that aside as well. Now we can unfixture this from our vise. This is brand new, so there's no oil inside of it. Likely what you're working on has some oil. Take some time, please, and use compressed air and spray the air through the bleed holes. Here, cover your finger up with one of them, and you're going to get some oil spraying outside of here. Reason being for that is we prefer this to be as dry as possible because when we go to heat this up next, if there's residual oil in there, you're going to really smoke out your garage or your shop, potentially get a fire going on. Don't ask me how I know this. We have some shaft block clamps that are made by Racetech up in Corona. They're a great company. They make some great parts. They do some good suspension as well. Even though we're competitors, I like to give credit where credit is due. They're definitely the originator of the whole gold valve and DIY system. They definitely influenced us at Ride JBI to come out with our own DIY kits. However, we definitely have our own unique and different approach on that. Anyhow, we got these shaft block clamps from Racetech. Other companies such as K-Tech, which is back east in New York, makes a similar tooling product as well. And so does Technical Touch, also located in the Corona or Ontario, California area. These are going to be a critical piece to have in order to safely remove the OEM rebound post that is mounted to our cartridge rod. So first we're going to take is a clean microfiber towel, wipe down our rod of any oil, dirt, debris, dust, blood if this isn't going that well for you, hopefully not. And then also we're going to wipe down the groove that we're going to fixture that rod inside of as well. Now, if you have any sort of markings, depressions, or sharp nicks inside of your shaft block clamping tool, please take a very high grit sandpaper and dress that up and clean it up first before you clamp this, because anything like that is going to leave an impression and mark inside of your cartridge rod as well. As you can see, these ones are relatively new, clean, and free of any debris or markings or damage. So they're going to grip and clamp this very well and not leave any marks. Now I'm going to rise this up just a little bit so I have some clearance for my tool. And then we're really going to get after it in terms of torquing this down. Now it is time for our heat to come out. We're going to heat this up for a while. And then also the 19 wrench is what we're going to use to crack this loose. Now you can use that. I'm going to use my nit picks just because I love these things. What's rad about that is I can squeeze onto this post really well and hold on to it. Whereas with the wrench, it definitely fits, but you have some play inside of it. However, it is a 19 mil that will work. If you're looking where you can pick these up at, Amazon, they're awesome. I saw a guy using a set of these in an install video years ago, and to be honest, I was about to talk some shit in a comment and be like, why are you using an adjustable wrench? And then I already looked in the comments and somebody already had, and then the creator of the video really ripped back at him saying, obviously you don't know what these are. So then I looked into what they were and looked how cool they are and how well they work, and I became sold. As you can see, we have all the different sizes here at Ride JBI. We got the big one, we got the small one. Ooh, that's a beautiful fitment right there. What's rad is that these jaws, they stay parallel when you open them up instead of articulating downward. Also, when you do grip something, you have a huge leverage advantage. So if you're ever working on something that is a non-nominal size, by that I mean, if it's not exactly 19 millimeters, say it's 18 and a half, obviously a wrench is going to fit that well. That's where something like this works really, really well. All right, we've had enough fun on that. Let's turn on our propane torch. All right, we got it nice and hot. Let's grip this, and we're going to go this way with it to loosen it. Now, when you guys are doing this, likely there's going to be oil on it. So I like to heat it up until it changes color. That tells me that we've heated it up enough. But this one, since there's no oil on it and our propane torch wasn't getting that hot, the post did not really change color. So a good tip is warm it up enough to where you start to see a color change on it. That'll be a good indicator that you've heated up enough. Now, while this is still hot, don't touch that. Just grab our wire brush, and we have some Loctite right here. So let's clean off that and dress it up real nice for the application of our JBI titanium rebound post, complete with JBI titanium leaf spring mid-valve assembly. So I'm gonna let this cool down a little bit because I'm actually gonna remove it. We're gonna apply some Loctite while we hold this vertical, so that way the Loctite doesn't drip down. And then we'll start finger tightening this. We'll remount it back into there, torque it down with some nit picks, and then start installing our valving as well. Cool, so we're gonna apply some Loctite to the threads. Now let's take note of two key pieces we wanna make sure that are still in there. This is our Rebound needle, and then this is a Rebound spring as well, so that way you get some pushback when you adjust that clicker. Please verify that you have both of these components still inside your cartridge rod. So let's shake up our Loctite bottle. We're gonna apply some Loctite onto this. And then now let's spread it around to get a good application all throughout the threads. Cool. So I'm going to start finger assembling this. So that way, again, the Loctite doesn't drip down our shaft or cartridge rod. And that's where it's going to stop. We're always going to have a small little gap. If you're unsure of that, you can look at the OEM one before you take apart the other. You're going to see that it has the same amount of, we'll call it a gap as well. So now that we have that in there, let's refixture this back inside of our vise. Now, be careful when you're doing this. Don't let the rod slide as you're doing that, because there's a chance you could scratch the anodize, and then you're going to be calling me for a replacement cartridge rod. Cool. So we got that. We have this mounted very tight. As you can see, I'm putting a lot of effort into my vise to hold it. We got some good shaft block clamps. Again, brought to you by Racetech. So now we're going to use our nit picks, and we're going to apply the same amount of force that it took us to require the removal of this. I like to put my bottom hand here and actually hold the rod. So that way, if you begin to feel the rod to rotate at all, you know, one, you have torqued it enough and you need to stop so you don't damage the rod. Excellent. So that is good to go. So now it's time to remove the M6 gold titanium nut we have provided you with. Secondly, you're going to find a small O-ring. This O-ring is on here to prevent the shims from jumping up and down and moving during the shipping and transit time. So let's move that. Now what I want you to do before you assemble this is take this piston, slide it on, and there should not be any gap between the piston and the shims. And when you put it on, it might preload the shims, like it might push it down a little bit, but what we're looking for is relatively a neutral position, meaning when we assemble this, the piston does contact the shims, but it only pushes down on it very lightly. I share this because if during shipping these shims get moved around at all, what can happen is they will get not out of order, but let's show you. Here's our slide collar. In the bottom of our spring plate, our titanium leaf spring plate, we have two more shims that are called travel limiter shims. So we want to make sure that, there we go, we want to make sure that our collar is located at the center of our leaf spring cup. What we don't want to happen is, I'll slide this up, if these become off-centered, when you slide this down, this is not going to locate into the center of the cup. Let me show you that again. If these are centered, this goes all the way into the cup. If they're not, this is going to sit on top. And here's how you'll know that, is after you put on these shims and locate them around it, this is going to protrude much more than it should. And then when you put on the Rebound piston, you're going to have a big gap. So that's what we do not want to have in one of the technical parts of this install. But now that I've mansplained it to you for a couple minutes, the possibility of you doing this should be 0. So let's fix the problem that I created to demonstrate to you what not to do and why the O-ring comes on there. So easy fix. Make sure you put something in the middle like I'm doing, so that way you keep everything in order and you don't drop it on the floor. All right, here's our 2 limiter shims inside the cup. Let's put our side collar back into the center. Beautiful. If we did that right, these shims will not be able to move around. Now they can spin, that's fine, but they can't move on the inside around. Cool, so now let's locate the rest of our shims back on here. Awesome. Beautiful. Let's stack on our piston. Now again, this piston is directional. As you can see, we have a recess cut into the center that is going to locate on our slide collar. Ooh, we are close, guys, looking good. Now here is our JBI Rebound stack we provided you with. It's complete with an entire shim stack and a new, let's call it titanium stopper plate for the shims, and that's what the nut's going to go against. So let's untwist this beautiful gold twist tie wire that is also made out of titanium. Just kidding, it's not. And I'm going to slide this onto here so I can keep everything in order and then pull that out. Again, we've done a really good job of providing the shims that are already clean, but just verify in case your work area is dirty or dusty that there's no contaminants on these shims, because we want them to sit on our piston flat, evenly, and clean and create a very positive seal. So now that that is completed, we have our M6 nut. Again, it is directional. You can see some small cuts. Whereas if we flick it around this way, you can't see them. So this is going to be the way it's going to be orientated once we assemble it. Now, again, I'm very picky on my Loctite application. I don't like it to go everywhere. So we're going to unfixture this. We're going to hold this at about a 45-degree angle, maybe even more, closer to 90. Shake up our bottle. If you're a bartender, you can do it over your shoulder like this, like you're mixing a drink. Cool, and then I'll use applicator tip. Kind of move around that Loctite. Now, since we have brand new threads, brand new nut, all this is going to thread on by hand quite easily. Since this has already been mounted, I'm actually just going to go ahead and fixture this like this, so we don't have to clamp it anymore. And now it is time, again, to use our 1/4-inch drive torque wrench set at 55 inch-pounds, and we're going to torque down this nut. So that's been Loctited down. What we want to check is the top rebound shims. They do not spin, they do not move in any way, they're fixed. Also, the rebound piston should be fixed as well. It should not move up and down, it should not spin either. However, the shims at the bottom, called our mid-valve compression shims, these ones you should be able to spin with your fingernail ever so slightly, and they'll be able to lift away pretty easily if you use your fingernail to pull down as well. Now, how easy it is to pull these away would depend on the shim stack that we provide you with. This one shown here is our motocross setting. Off-road settings would be quite a bit easier to lift open, and anything stiffer than motocross would be quite a bit harder to lift open. However, on all of them, this bottom shim stack, you will be able to spin with your finger for it. So this has been done perfectly as well. Now it's ready to install this back inside our cartridge cylinder. Now, for the KYB forks on the mid piston, this is a composite Teflon band. Sorry, it's a composite band. Not sure what it's made out of, but as you can see, it has a little bit of a loose fit. I share this because when we put this back on the inside of here, if you have any struggle pushing this through, we want to make sure that the edge of this band is not getting caught on the inside bore of it and trying to push this off. If that happens, you'll pull it back out. You're going to use your fingers to kind of push this band or mold it back in the shape to not be so stretched. But before we do that, we need to install our volume spacer in this area right here. As you can see, I have the cartridge routed mounted upside down, and we're going to install our volume spacer first. Now on some models, the spring perch will just slide right off. On other models, the oil lock collar is going to prevent that from happening. So in order to do that, we need to remove the snap ring that holds the oil lock collar in place. Now again, I have these pliers that are great for removing snap rings. They're made by Snap-on. If you don't have a set, you can use a flathead to pry open, but there's a good chance, one, you're going to stab yourself, and then two, the snap ring is going to go flying off once you get it off. Don't ask me how I know how. So we're going to use these and safely remove this snap ring. We got our rubber JBI volume spacer. I already went ahead and finger blasted it on the inside with some grease to make it easy to slide over our cartridge cylinder. Now this is a compression fit, so you're going to have some resistance as you slide it down. And then once we get close to this area, we're going to use something to pry underneath the bumper so we can get it to go over what we call our spring seat stopper, and it'll locate right inside of this region. All right, so we have it very close to the spring seat stopper. I have a small, it's called a seal puller tool. We're going to get just underneath the bumper. And then for some reason, I found it's easier to grip these with something like a towel. So I'm going to grab that. I'm actually going to do a twisting motion and spin it as I push down. So that way we're going to get the lip of this over the lip of that. Let's see if I can do it in a way to where you guys can see. There we go. Ooh, voila. And if you did it right, the JBI should be upside down, because this cartridge upside down, when you pick it right side up, it will be proper. Now, if you're buying the JBI Pro Perch from us, this would be the time that you install it next. If not, you're going to reinstall the OEM spring seat. Don't forget your oil lock collar. And then lastly, of course, the snap ring that's going to hold it in place. Now, this is much easier to do without the cartridge rod in there. That's why we're doing it now. Now that's not fully in place. I'm going to push down with my fingers. And then to verify it's in there, go ahead and push on one of the ends and spin it. And as you can see, it rotates as it should, indicating it has found its home and is going to keep our oil lock collar from not moving. Excellent. Now is our next step will be to install the cartridge rod assembly back inside of here. The white flag is out. We're on our final lap. So now it's time to install our now JBI Spec cartridge assembly into our cartridge cylinder assembly. So first, let's get some grease. We're going to apply it onto the threads here at the bottom. So that way we can safely push this past our cartridge rod seal without damaging it. As you can see, I'm pretty much completely filling the grooves of the threads with grease. We're going to get a little bit more. And then also we're going to apply a little bit of grease to this piston band right here on the outside. But let's not get too carried away and make a messy job out of it. And then as you can see, I got a little bit on the piston, so I'm going to go ahead and just clean up any excess and get that off. And now we're ready to install this into our cartridge cylinder. So let's not drop it straight down like that. Let's be nice to it and kind of slide it in at an angle. And now you can probably look in there and see where it's located. So now we got to allow it to find its home. Ooh, now this one is perfectly centered. One way we can verify that is if we look at the bottom, we see it popping here out at the bottom. Now what I like to do is take our number 10 T-handle, and we're going to put that right on top of that M6 nut. And I'm going to spin it in direction as if you're tightening the nut. So that way we can help finish it Cool, now that is in. We can pull this out the rest of the way. So one thing we want to listen for is if you hear that sound, I'm going to do it again. That's suction. So what that means is that the piston band is creating a good seal inside of this cartridge. If you move this up and down and you don't really hear that sound and your forks are relatively older, like they got a good amount of hours on them, let's say anything more than like 60 to 90 hours, you may need to replace that rebound piston band in order to get a better seal again. Now it's something that you kind of got to do by feel, so it might be a little challenging to know without kind of past experience to go on. But if you do have that sound, that's telling us you're creating a good seal. So let's take a rag, wipe off the excess lube we have here at the bottom. And we can apply our lock nut. Now we're going to mount this inside of our JBI vise over there. And then we're going to let this cure for actually a day. We're in no rush. And then we're going to pour some oil inside of it. And I'll show you guys how to bleed up this cartridge. And then that will be the end of the video. Because after that, you definitely know how to install the rest of the fork. And you've done a great job following along and understanding how to install our new JBI KYB DIY Spec forks. All right, guys, like I said, we got the white flag out. We're on our last lap. We're a few corners away from finishing this up and taking the championship home. So here's what we got. We got the star of the show, our JBI Spec compression assembly. As you can see, I applied some grease to the threads, and I also put grease around the bottom O-ring here because that is the one that creates the main seal for this assembly. I do that especially because, one, this cartridge is dry as it's been brand new, and also helps to install everything and make it go easier. Also, this free piston is going to be moving up and down quite a bit as you ride. My motto here is, if you love it, lube it. So we like to do that here at the shop. Also next to me I have a graduated beaker. We have 200 cc's or milliliters, depending on the units you want to use, of 5-weight fork oil inside of it. At the shop we like the KYB brand, but I can't stress this enough. In the past I have used with good success pretty much all other big brand name oil you can think of. So if you prefer somebody else's, that's fine. Just make sure it's a 5-weight. On your settings guide, we will have that listed. It'll say inner chamber fork oil volume. And I'm actually going to have a range on there. It's going to say 195 to 200 cc's. The reason for that range is if your fork previously had oil in it, there's probably still some residual oil in it. So if so, I'd say add 195 because you don't need to add as much. Again, this cartridge has never had any oil in it before, so it is dry. So we're going to do the 200 cc's of oil. Now I'm actually not going to pour the oil straight in. I'm going to take out this cartridge and I'm going to pour this at an angle as if I'm pouring a beer, and I don't want a lot of foam. As I do that, I'm going to cover our 2 vent holes with my fingers to ensure that none of the oil leaks out. Oh, and last trick, we do have a vent hole here as well for when you take out the bleed screw to vent your forks. Let's make sure that is aiming upward as well so we don't lose oil from there. Let's try to do this at the camera so you guys can better see. So let's do a 45-degree angle, just like we're pouring a beer, and we'll take our time. So that way we don't create excess bubbles in our oil and just add to the overall bleed time of this build. Now let's really get that last little bit, because once you set this container down, you'll notice that a fair amount of oil is going to pull back up in the bottom. Just make sure we get all of it. Drip, drip, drip. All right, I'm feeling pretty confident on that. So I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to remount it inside our JBI vise. We also have other vise fixtures as well. So however you want to hold this, man, you go ahead and do that. Key takeaway, since I'm gripping up here and this free piston is going to be located in this section, I'm not tightening it too much or else that's going to out around or distort the cylinder, making it harder than it should be to install our new JBI Spec compression assembly. I'm going to do it just tight enough to hold this cartridge cylinder assembly as we bleed the air bubbles out of it. So with this being held, I'm going to reach down here at the bottom and I'm going to lift up on this cartridge, and I like to spin it at the same time. Sorry, cartridge rod to be specific. And I go up about half of the cartridge rod's travel. to about there. I'll pause for a moment because right now we move the mid piston up until this region and we're allowing oil that's above it to kind of backfill below it. I'll look down, I see some air bubbles coming up, a nice steady stream. Now I'm going to spin it the opposite direction as I go back down. That way we can get out any air bubbles that might be inside of the mid-valve piston. As you see, I'm doing this pretty slow. I'm not moving it rapidly. If you move it very quickly, you're actually going to create more air bubbles inside of it. So please don't do that. And we're going to take a small break in between strokes. We're going to do like 5 to 10 seconds. It's really not that funny, but I think it's funny. We're going to do 5 to 10 seconds in between each stroke that we do. We did so good on this video, but at the end, I'm going kind of immature, aren't I? All right, we waited a little bit. Now, one thing I like to do is if we give a little tap and kind of bang it, that vibration is going to help get some bubbles out of the oil as well. So we can look down, maybe Anthony can capture some of the air bubbles. It's a little dark, but as you can see, we still have some bubbles, and that's to be expected. We've only pumped it up and down twice so far, or one cycle. So let's kind of spin it and lift up again. Again, we're going to about halfway. We're going to look down. We still see some more bubbles collecting, so let's wait another 10 seconds before we do the downstroke on it. Now, this is why we have this fixture to the left of us, because at Ride JBI, we don't like to have our vices that we do a lot of work on taking up a fork cartridge as we bleed it. And also, we want to take as much time as possible. So that cartridge is in a specific bleeding fixture that we made. So that way we can fill it up with oil. We can pump the rod up and down a couple of times, walk away, forget about it, go do other stuff, and let gravity do its thing and really get all the air bubbles out of it. This is not something you should rush, so please just take your time. The more time you spend doing this, the better quality bleed and purging of air you're going to do, and the better the fork cartridge is going to feel once you ride it. All right, time for the downstroke. Again, let's spin the cartridge rod in the opposite direction. And I can kind of hear some bubbles as I go down, so that still tells us we got quite a few pumps to go. But again, that's very common. Normally, we will spend a half hour bleeding some fork cartridges. Now, it doesn't take that long. It's just that, again, we have specific fixtures for that. So they're not taking up any of our other vices, so we can spend that much time doing it. If I had to just set one up right here like we're doing now, it's going to take us a good 5 to 10 minutes in order to get a good bleed on it before we do our final assembly. Cool, so some air bubbles are still coming up, but they're not coming up at the same rate as they were before. So meaning fewer bubbles are coming, so that tells us that we're getting a better and better bleed and there's less bubbles in there. So as we continue to do this, less and less bubbles will come up, and at some point we pretty much won't get any, and then that'll indicate to us that we are ready to install our JBI Spec compression assembly into this KYB cartridge cylinder. Let's give it a couple more love taps. All right, let's do another upstroke. Again, spin the cartridge rod. Cool, this is bleeding up very nice, which is to be expected. We have a new cartridge rod seal at the bottom. We have a brand new assembly, so all new seals there. If you ever find that you're bleeding this and you're continuing to get bubbles over and over and over, then what that likely means is that your cartridge rod seal, so the seal that seals around the cartridge rod located down here below, that is probably leaking and it's allowing air to bypass it. That is a very common replacement item on this style of fork. So if that's happening, don't stress. You can buy the seal from us if you need it, and you just got to replace it and your fork will be working good again. Again, it's a very common item that wears out over time. Typically at Ride JBI, if we see a set of forks that has more than 20 hours on them, we're going to replace that fork seal, kind of no questions asked. Sorry, it is a fork seal, but fork cartridge rod seal, we're going to do that regardless, just to ensure that you still get a long service life out of them. typically for your average rider, weekend warrior, you'll get between 30 to 40 hours of service life out of a set of cartridge rod seals. Beautiful. So the oil is actually so clear because we use this KYB oil that I can actually see the top of the mid-valve assembly. I can see the gold JBI titanium nut and the burnt blue titanium washer underneath it. That is harder to see when a lot of air bubbles are coming up because that's distorting the clarity of the oil and your ability to see through it. So we're going to spin this again and go down. I think this is our 4th cycle maybe. So we're getting pretty close to being ready to install this. All right, I'm not getting any air bubbles, but for good measure, we're gonna do it one more time because, well, we got time and we're gonna do it right. We're gonna do it to the best of our ability, and so are you. Cool, a couple more love taps. Now, just every once in a while, I'm getting like a straggler. It's like one little bubble kind of just poop, works its way up. And then at the very end, we do a final bleed, and that's definitely going to get out any air that might still be residing inside of this cartridge cylinder assembly. All right, let's spin it down, and then this will be our last one. Cool. So I have 0 air bubbles coming up. I don't have any visually in here. I'm going to tap this a few times, see if I can get any extras, which I'm not seeing any. And if you want to be really OCD about it, just kind of spin the rod one way and spin it the other way while keeping it down. And if you got any air bubbles there, they'll definitely come up. But right now we are looking clear and good to go. I'll let Anthony kind of zoom in and show you guys what I'm looking at in terms of the clarity of the oil and how we got no air bubbles that we are seeing. All right, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to refixture this just because I don't want to clamp this as I assemble it. It's going to be a little bit easier not to have it that way. I'm going to put it over in this item right here. And the reason I'm going to do that is we're going to be putting a lot of downward force or pressure on this, and I don't want the cartridge to slip out of the fixture. I don't have to torque this down that much. I just have to lightly do it so it doesn't really move. Now I'm going to cheat. If you have one of these, it's called oil height setter. For these, if you set this at 142 millimeters, you'll get out just a little bit of oil. But what that's going to do is make your install be a little bit easier. If you don't do that, it's just going to take a little bit extra force and pressure to install this compression assembly into the cartridge. And for me, I like to work smart. Well, I do my best to. So before we do that, we're going to move our cartridge rod up about halfway through its travel. And we're going to do that slow. Cool. So we got that about halfway out. Reason I did it is when I go ahead and assemble this, that is going to start pushing down and the oil is going to start going down. So it's actually going to try to create a vacuum inside of here, which is going to help pull our assembly down into it as well. Very nice. All right, we got grease all the way around. We got a bit of grease up here so our threads don't get galled up as there's a lot of stress and force against them. Let's put our tool in on top. Now this is not quite touching the oil yet. It's going to take a little bit of massaging to do so. Let's make sure our tool's in the right direction. Brilliant. All right, and then I'll try to get the microphone close so you can kind of hear what it sounds like once it engages. Cool. If we look down, our cartridge rod extended out. Now, if I quit pushing, this actually gets pushed back up. So I have to put some effort to keep that down. So now I use both hands. Now what I can do is I can keep tightening this, but I don't want to. Instead, I'm just going to use our fork cap tool. And that'll hold our cartridge from spinning. So that way we're not applying excess pressure to the roundness of the cylinder. We want to keep it nice and round, not have any distortions inside of it. Ooh, all right. So now is the time we're going to give it a little ugga-duggas, make it a little more snug. We don't want it going anywhere. Now we are ready for our final bleed. I have a red shop rag that I folded into 4 sections, nice and neatly. And what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it around this region right here, around these holes. So that way we don't get sprayed with oil or make a mess. As much as I love suspension, oil is the bane of my existence, and I don't like getting it everywhere. So let's wrap it up around it, cover up these holes. Now it is time to do our final bleed. I'm going to push this cartridge all the way down. Hell, I'll do it right here so you guys can see. Until this lock nut bottoms out on the inside of the cartridge. It's very important to make sure your lock nut is all the way up. So meaning all the threads should be showing as possible. And this could not thread up anymore, or else it's going to throw off your purge point. There's a bug. Now it's dying in oil. I'm sorry, dude, but you scared me. Like, where'd you come from? I just didn't expect a bug on my arm. I felt it, and I was like, that can't be anything. And then I looked over, and, well, you heard me. I didn't get roasted in the comments on that. No, it's fine. Leave it in. That's funny. All right. So I'm going to go down slow. Ooh, so that sound right there means that it's starting to purge out the extra oil. I'm actually going to hold it at that spot. We still have a little bit more to go. So now let's keep going. There's more of it. And all the way down. So I'm actually going to hold it here for about 10 seconds. Let's remove this rag. You can see some of the oil dripping out of our vent port. So what's happening is any excess oil that was in here vented out. And now as it vents out, the free piston is actually going back down. And it's going to, I don't want to say equalize its pressure, but it's going to equalize the proper amount of oil volume that we want to have inside of this cartridge. The reason I did it slowly is because the oil is denser than the air inside of it. So the first thing that's going to come out of these vent ports is going to be the air followed by the oil. So that's why I stopped at the first point. I heard that purging sound. So that way we can let most of the air go out ahead of the oil. And then once that kind of went, I continued it, but we did it slowly. All right, so now I'm just going to lift up. Ooh, beautiful. So this extended all the way. There's no play, meaning I don't have to pull it out an extra ½ inch or anything. Now on some of the older YZ models, probably like 2012 or maybe even a little bit older than that, on some of those, there's not positive pressure on the rod all the way. So meaning it won't extend out maybe the last ½ inch. Hit me up. I have a trick to make sure that happens, but we don't typically see too many of those bikes nowadays. It's because they probably are in the landfill now. So for good riddance, we can do this one more time. Get a little extra oil coming out. Ooh, she's a squirter. Cool. Now you have successfully won the race. The checker flag's out. You just crushed it and installed our new JBI KYB DIY kit. So I know you know how to take it from here. Get this wrapped up, get it mounted on your bike, and enjoy shredding your new JBI Spec suspension.